primary school where we worked last year. This is from last summer, but we've started a new project with the same school. It's a school in South London, very, very regular school, wide catchment area, a lot of people with very low incomes, but also one or two with higher incomes. It's an interesting place. It's like a mile from Westminster, which is the House of Parliament. It's maybe a mile and a half from where the Queen lives, and yet maybe half the kids have difficult families or parents who are unemployed or who have perhaps issues with drug abuse and that kind of thing. But a really great atmosphere, and this is an example in a way of how I approach the work, which is you just completely take on side the people who run the school. So the teachers, the head teacher becomes your very best friend, and in partnership you create work which is owned by the kids, owned by the teachers, owned by the school. The exquisite drawing, which is of the dog in space. And the dog that inspired him was Laika, who was the famous Russian dog that was sent into space in 1957. And then another one thought, oh wow, that's the most amazing idea for an opera. So then we created an opera, which I was talking about before. And that opera has been all over the place and it's done really well. I'll show you a bit of that in a while. But that opera in turn inspired the moments you just saw. So that became an opera that was owned by a primary school because they did a story which is what would happen if Laika landed back on Earth in 2013 in the local park in Brixton, the area of South London. So they created a narrative in which the Russians were after, the dog landed alive 40 years later, and the Russians were after her, the Prime Minister was after her, the scientists were after her, everybody was after her.
Difficult, mobile special needs, blind people, ear impaired. And what we really want is integrate, and we do it, as Tim knows that, we do it mixing people on stage. We are not doing projects. One good thing that I really love to see today is that you have mixed people. You have all kinds of people, and it was not important to see if they were blind or deaf. Well, they are part of the show. And that's the most important thing.
I'm curious about those self-made instruments workshops. There are people who know how to somehow do electric.
Yes. In our 25 people that worked with us, we have some that are. Well, actually I can call them nerds because...
Yeah, exactly.
But they are nerds.
Yeah.
They are focusing computers and developing instruments. And they've been doing excellent things. For example, that you've seen that controls...
Yeah.
It's a MIDI controller, like a keyboard, but it controls with movement. In fact, it's a IKEA salad bowl.
Oh, okay.
Yes, with the technology inside and some sensors, and you can control, for example, the notes and the speed. You can define that. Another thing you've seen a little bit in the previous video, we have a football ball with Wii, Nintendo Wii, remote control inside. And you can control sound. You can do high notes, low notes, or you can shake. So we're doing this kind of instruments that are very non-traditional instruments even in their shape. But it's a very good way to do projects with special need people. And not only, I try, for example, this ball. As I told you. This ball we use also in a children's concert, in a baby's concert. and we just give them to the kids, and they start playing with it.
For you, in terms of networking, I mean, why is networking important for you today? What is interesting about
the idea is actually to show that how similar the projects are, but still they are in the national level, they are different kinds. But of course, just use ideas in every profession. You should use networking. I don't know. Do you disagree?
No. I wish I had the money to travel and.
I think I have the same.
But nowadays doesn't really need traveling. Doesn't really need so much cost.
One classroom working with a classroom teacher becomes an opera company, and this happens starts the first week in the school year, and then they devote the whole year inside the curriculum, and not as an after-school activity, but like something that they do as one of the main things they do in the classroom. They devote some 4-6 hours a week, and at the end of the year they present their opera. They create their own opera, and that means there's no adults at all involved in the performances. Creating the libretto is very important because it's like a central piece of the opera. Usually it's a whole classroom working around the basic story, and then the writers do the dialogues or songs or whatever, the detail. And then everything springs from that, you know, like there's music to that, there's characters, and there's costumes.
I myself have been teaching composition 10 years, and I like that children do what they can, and it's the level which children want to, what they can do. But then and we know that children, they cannot do things that they put baseline, they put things that's adults' job. Yeah. And I like that you leave the things like children can do it.
But it's tricky because sometimes it's unfair.
Yes. I don't know about you, but I've also found that children can remember complex melodies much better than adults sometimes can.
You're right.
They have the most phenomenal memory, you know.
You're right.
And you can be much more explorative than you think sometimes. They can go, yeah, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
You're right.
Out of the diatonic scale.
Yeah.
I also have that feeling.
Yeah.
I work with kids a lot, and they just create melodies that were almost 12 tones melodies.
Yeah.
And they could remember everything.
Yeah.
And I had to
Yeah. And they remember it, but if you try and teach a 18-year-old that, they would find it really hard.
Somewhere else. But in our school we have small groups and lots of adults, and of course our students have severe problems, and now we have 2 schools put together, the school for blind and those who have problems in seeing, and then the school for deaf and SLI, specific language impairment. The small kids were from that classroom, and then those who have hearing problems, and then also we have those students who have autism spectrum disorders. So many kinds of.
What ages?
From the preschool, from 5 to 18 years, because we have that voluntary basic education class, which I teach at 10th grade.
Instrumental parts for the students, they were like handwritten for this student with this instrument in hand. For example, when we heard playing the chords with the piano, it was like wow, where did you get the idea to play so dissonant chords? That it was like, we must have this in our piece. We got a bunch of many haikus. We had Jorge visited us in December and in January. That he had been talking with the students about the structure, what happens in the first scene, what happens in the second scene, what happens in the third scene, and then there were like haikus for the first scene, there were haikus for the second scene, there were haikus for the third scene, but then we had a chance to, okay, what would be the best possible order with the haikus.
Maybe has something about the haikus.
Tiina, who is teaching the deaf students, she thought that no way they can't do any haikus because they don't know the language as we do, because the sign language has a different kind of grammar and it's so different. So it was a learning experience for those children too, that they could create those haikus.
What is the specific characteristics about this method, which is very similar to other methods, but still has what's characteristic, and certainly is one variation of the artist meets kids principle. Yeah. So that it's the communication between. I mean, Jorge gives them his like theater experience and everything, and then the composers communicate with the kids. So it's this very collaborative thought. In this case, maybe that was also a solution that was a bit of a surprise solution, that the poet wasn't involved in the process itself, but then just came to, that was, we hadn't thought about it, but that was just a solution. But for example, in the coming opera that Riikka is going to present there, we have had the poet have a workshop with the kids to collect material, but then written the libretto herself. And then Riikka composed it, but then she leaves space. Well, you will tell about that.